There's a strange kind of pain that comes from realizing not every smile around you is as genuine as it seems. Sometimes, the deepest discomfort doesn't arrive through loud arguments or obvious betrayal. It grows quietly in hidden conversations, in passing remarks, and in opinions formed behind closed doors by people you once believed were harmless. Right now, someone close to the person you love has been planting quiet doubts about you, shaping a version of your character that feels completely different from the truth you carry inside. These people laugh beside you, share moments with you, and act warm in your presence. Yet somewhere beneath that surface, they have already decided who they think you are. They see you as someone easy to read, easy to misjudge, someone who would never notice what happens in silence. What hurts even more is that the person you love hears these conversations unfold. At times they try to protect your name. Other times, they choose silence because confronting people is harder than pretending nothing is wrong. But silence has a dangerous way of sounding like agreement when it happens too often. Slowly, those repeated opinions begin influencing emotions, decisions, and future choices without you ever getting the chance to defend yourself. This situation is no longer a simple misunderstanding or careless gossip between friends. It has turned into something heavier, something emotionally charged that has been building beneath the surface for longer than anyone admits. The tension surrounding you is becoming impossible to hide, and sooner or later, the truth behind these quiet judgments will finally reveal itself in a way nobody can avoid anymore. Because what you are about to hear connects directly to why things have recently felt slightly off, even when nothing looked wrong on the surface. Listen carefully now. Those two friends believe they understand you better than you understand yourself. They have watched how you speak. They have noticed how you stay calm when others react. They have seen you choose peace instead of confrontation. And instead of recognizing strength, they labeled it weakness. Instead of seeing depth, they called it simplicity. Instead of respecting patience, they mistook it for ignorance. Every time you walked away from drama, they quietly laughed. Every time you trusted the person you love, they exchanged glances. In their private conversations, your name became a reference point. They say things like you will never notice. They say you will never question. They say you will never fight back. And the shocking part is not what they say. The shocking part is when they say it. They say it during happy moments. They say it when plans are being made. They say it when your future is being discussed without you present. This is where the story turns serious, because opinions repeated often enough stop being opinions. They turn into assumptions, and assumptions, when left unchallenged, turn into actions that can quietly shift the direction of your life without asking your permission. Now feel this carefully. The person you love is standing at the center of this triangle. On one side is you. On the other side are these two friends. And in the middle is influence. Influence does not shout. Influence whispers. Influence waits for moments of doubt. Influence enters during stress, confusion, or emotional vulnerability. These two friends believe you are very replaceable in situations that require strength. They believe you would step aside instead of standing firm. They believe that if pressure comes, you would choose comfort over truth. And here is the revelation that changes everything. Recently, they tested this belief. Not loudly, not openly. They tested it subtly, through comments, through suggestions, through carefully planted ideas. And the person you love noticed. They noticed because something felt wrong. They noticed because the way you were being described did not match the way you have shown up consistently. This created internal conflict, and that conflict is growing, because once someone realizes that others are misjudging someone they care about, a decision quietly begins forming. A decision about who they truly trust when it matters most. There is a moment coming very soon where these hidden opinions will no longer stay hidden. It will not come as an argument, it will come as a situation, a moment that demands a response, a moment where character becomes visible without words. And when that moment arrives, everything these two friends believe about you will either collapse instantly or expose something they never expected. This is why the energy around you has been shifting. This is why conversations have felt slightly different. This is why the person you love has been observing you more closely lately, not with suspicion, but with curiosity and quiet evaluation. They are watching how you move, how you react, how you handle pressure, because deep down, they want to know if what these friends say is true or completely wrong. This is not a coincidence. This is preparation. And the outcome of this preparation will decide who holds real influence in their life going forward. Here is the part you were not prepared for. Those two friends are afraid of something they cannot control. They are afraid that if you are ever fully seen, fully understood, and fully respected, their voices will lose power. They are afraid that your calm hides a strength they cannot compete with. They are afraid that your silence is actually awareness. And they are afraid that when the truth finally surfaces, the image they created of you will be exposed as false. This is why they continue believing you are very unaware, because believing that keeps them comfortable. But comfort does not last forever. Truth has a way of arriving without warning, and when it does not ask who is ready. It simply reveals. What happens next will not be loud. It will be precise. The strange thing about betrayal is that it rarely arrives with noise. Most of the time, it moves quietly through conversations, hidden inside casual remarks and carefully placed opinions. At first, the person you love may not even notice what is happening around them. They hear the comments, they absorb the doubts, but they still hold on to the version of you they have personally experienced. And that is where everything slowly begins to change. The deeper those outside voices try to shape your image, the more your actions from the past begin resurfacing in their memory. Not the dramatic moments filled with emotion, but the softer details that once felt ordinary. The patience you carried during difficult times, the calm way you handled tension without creating more of it, the little things you remembered when everyone else forgot. Those memories become impossible to ignore because they no longer fit the negative picture being painted around you. And when someone notices that contradiction, a quiet shift begins inside them. Suddenly, they stop analyzing you and start analyzing the people speaking against you. They begin noticing how often the criticism appears, how rehearsed the tone sounds, and how certain individuals seem unusually determined to influence their feelings. What once felt like harmless advice now feels calculated. Even the smallest expressions start revealing hidden intentions. The timing of the comments, the subtle satisfaction when misunderstandings happen, the strange persistence behind every warning. None of it feels accidental anymore. And once a person starts recognizing patterns instead of isolated moments, their perspective changes forever. Because truth has a way of revealing itself slowly, until eventually, it becomes impossible to overlook. The person you love notices how these friends speak about others too, how they simplify complex people, how they reduce strength into labels that make them feel superior. And suddenly, a frightening realization appears. If they can misjudge you so confidently, they can misjudge anyone, including the person they claim to care about. That realization creates distance, not dramatic distance, but emotional withdrawal. Conversations become shorter, trust becomes conditional, and in that space, your presence starts to feel different, heavier, more grounded, more real. Without you doing anything at all, your consistency begins exposing their exaggerations. Here is where the tension sharpens. One of those friends pushes too far, not aggressively, but carelessly. They make a remark that assumes agreement, a remark that expects the person you love to nod along, and instead of agreement, there is silence, a long silence. In that silence, something breaks, because silence, when it follows disrespect, is not weakness. It is awareness deciding what deserves a response. The person you love does not defend you loudly. They do something far more dangerous. They stop sharing information. They stop inviting opinions. They stop giving access. And when influence loses access, it starts panicking. These friends sense the shift. They feel control slipping. That is when insecurity replaces confidence. And insecurity always exposes itself through impatience. Now understand this clearly. You were never meant to fight this battle directly, because battles like this are not won by proving yourself. They are won by being undeniable. The person you love is beginning to see that your strength does not announce itself. It reveals itself over time, under pressure. In contrast, compared to people who talk a lot but stand for very little, this realization is uncomfortable for them because it forces them to reevaluate their circle, and reevaluation leads to separation, not immediately, but inevitably. The more they observe you, the clearer it becomes that the image painted by those two friends was incomplete, distorted, and unfair. And once fairness enters the mind, loyalty starts shifting toward truth. What you do not see yet is that a moment is approaching where the person you love will need to choose whose voice carries weight when it truly matters, not in words, in decisions, in actions, in who they protect when narratives collide. That moment will feel sudden to you, but it has been building quietly for a long time. And when it arrives, the assumptions those two friends hold about you will be tested in real time, not by argument, by outcome. And outcomes do not lie. They expose character without explanation. This is why everything up to now has been preparation. Because once the truth stands on its own, no opinion survives against it. And when that happens, nothing goes back to how it was before. The moment finally begins without drama, without raised voices, and without anyone announcing that something important is happening. It starts with a situation that demands clarity, a situation where assumptions are useless and character speaks through choices. The person you love finds themselves under pressure, surrounded by opinions, expectations, and subtle manipulation. Those two friends are present, watching closely, confident that events will unfold exactly as they predicted. They expect hesitation from you. They expect confusion. They expect you to step back and let others take control. But what unfolds instead is something they never prepared for. You remain calm. You remain observant. You respond with precision, not emotion. Every move you make aligns with integrity rather than approval. And in that moment, the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. The person you love feels it instantly. A deep internal shift occurs because reality has now spoken louder than every whispered narrative that came before. This is not about winning. This is about truth standing upright without asking permission. As the situation develops, the two friends begin to lose rhythm. Their confidence fractures. Their expressions change. They kept talking long after the moment had already passed. Every sentence became another attempt to justify themselves, another effort to reshape a story that was no longer theirs to control. The more they explained, the more uneasy they appeared. Meanwhile, you stayed calm. You never rushed to defend yourself, never chased approval, never competed with the chaos around you. That silence carried a kind of confidence nobody could imitate. The person you love noticed it all quietly from a distance. They saw who remained grounded when tension rose, and who immediately folded under pressure. They recognized the difference between someone acting with sincerity and people reacting out of insecurity. And slowly, something shifted inside them. They realized your silence was never weakness, and your patience was never ignorance. You understood far more than anyone assumed. You simply refused to waste energy proving it. That realization stayed with them because it forced them to confront an uncomfortable truth. Outside opinions nearly convinced them to question someone who had consistently been genuine from the beginning. The weight of that understanding brought mixed emotions. There was comfort in finally seeing clearly, but also disappointment for allowing confusion to cloud their judgment at all. After that, distance formed naturally, not through arguments or dramatic endings, but through emotional withdrawal that became impossible to ignore. The connection with those friends began fading piece by piece. Conversations lost warmth, trust became cautious, and their influence slowly disappeared. Sensing this change, the friends tried once more to regain importance. They questioned your motives, twisted situations, and searched for new ways to create doubt, but the effort failed completely. Once truth becomes visible, manipulation loses its power, and forced narratives become painfully easy to recognize. The person you love now recognizes patterns they once dismissed. The tendency of these friends to undermine quietly, the habit of disguising judgment as concern, the need to feel superior by lowering others. These realizations are painful, but they are also freeing, because clarity always costs something, and what it costs is illusion. Now something deeper happens. The person you love reflects not only on you, but on themselves. They ask difficult internal questions. Why were they open to these opinions in the first place? Why did they allow others to shape their perception? Why did they confuse familiarity with loyalty? These questions lead to growth, and growth demands change. The change begins with boundaries, clear ones, strong ones, boundaries that do not need explanation. And within those boundaries, you are placed differently, with more respect, more trust, more weight. You are no longer someone being evaluated through others. You are someone being understood directly. That shift alters the entire dynamic of your connection. Communication deepens. Presence matters more. Silence becomes comfortable instead of suspicious. Because when trust returns, peace follows naturally. The final realization of this phase lands quietly but powerfully. The person you love understands that the greatest threat was never those two friends themselves. It was the possibility of believing them, and now that possibility is gone. What remains is clarity, strength and connection, and a new awareness of who truly deserves access to their inner world. Those friends fade into the background, not because they were confronted, but because they were outgrown, and you, without raising your voice or proving anything, stand firmly in truth. This is not the end of the story. This is the turning point, where everything that follows will be built on what has now been seen and cannot be unseen. A strange calm settles in after truth reveals itself, and this calm is not empty. It is heavy with understanding. The person you love begins acting differently around you, not louder, not overly affectionate, but more intentional. Their words carry weight now. Their pauses are thoughtful. Their eyes stay longer when they look at you, as if they are finally seeing without filters. This shift does not come from guilt alone. It comes from recognition. Recognition that you were standing firm long before anyone noticed. Recognition that strength does not always announce itself with noise. And recognition that trusting the wrong voices nearly cost them something real. The space between you changes. It feels safer, more grounded, less performative. And in that safety, something unspoken begins rebuilding. Trust, once fractured, does not return quickly, but when it does, it returns stronger than before. This is the phase where actions matter more than explanations. And without asking for reassurance, you receive it through consistency. Meanwhile, those two friends are struggling internally, not because they lost an argument, but because they lost relevance. People who rely on influence feel invisible when it disappears. They replay conversations. They question where control slipped. They tell themselves stories to protect their pride. But none of those stories change reality. The reality is that they misjudged you, and in doing so, exposed themselves. They start noticing how the person you love no longer seeks their input the way they used to. How plans are made without consulting them. How reactions that once earned validation now fall flat. This creates frustration. And frustration creates mistakes, small ones at first, then larger ones. Because when people feel excluded, they overcompensate, and overcompensation reveals intent. Each attempt to regain influence only confirms what the person you love has already realized, that these friends were more invested in being right about you than being fair to you. At the center of all this, you remain steady. Some people expect conflict the moment they lose influence over you. They wait for anger, for emotional reactions, for a public response that proves they still have power in your life. But when none of that happens, it unsettles them more than any argument ever could. Your calmness becomes impossible to ignore. While others create noise, you choose dignity. While they search for validation through drama, you protect your peace in silence. And the person standing beside you notices every bit of it. They see that your quiet nature is not weakness hiding in the shadows. It is confidence. It is emotional maturity. It is the rare ability to walk away from unnecessary battles without losing yourself in the process. That changes the way they look at you completely. Slowly, your words begin carrying more weight. Your advice feels meaningful because it comes without ego or manipulation. They trust your instincts because your actions consistently match your character. Respect like this is not forced overnight. It builds naturally through consistency, honesty, and restraint. At the same time, another realization begins forming in their mind. They start understanding that loyalty is not measured by how long someone has been around. It is revealed through intentions, through support, through the people who genuinely celebrate your growth instead of secretly resenting it. Without saying it openly, they begin noticing the contrast. Your presence brings calm, reassurance, and direction into their life. The others bring pressure, criticism, and subtle negativity disguised as concern. Eventually, the truth becomes impossible for them to ignore. Some connections drain the soul, while others strengthen it quietly, every single day. It does not need to be. It is felt. And once felt, it guides future choices effortlessly. This is where your position becomes unshakable. Not because you demanded it, but because you earned it through consistency over time. As this part of the story settles, a deeper bond forms between you and the person you love. It is quieter than before, but far more solid. There is less need to explain, less need to prove, less need to perform. You both understand something fundamental now. That truth reveals itself when pressure arrives. And when it does, it separates perception from reality. The misunderstanding planted by those two friends no longer holds power. It dissolves in the presence of lived experience. What remains is respect, clarity, and a connection that has survived distortion and emerged stronger. This is not closure. This is consolidation. The foundation is being set for what comes next. And what comes next will test not perception, but commitment. What comes next is not dramatic, but it is decisive. The person you love reaches a point where internal clarity demands external alignment. They begin making choices that quietly rearrange their world. Invitations change, priorities shift, access becomes intentional. This is not done to punish anyone. It is done to protect what finally feels real. You notice it in small ways first. More direct communication, fewer mixed signals, a stronger sense of presence when they are with you. They are no longer torn between voices. The confusion that once hovered in the background begins to dissolve, and in its place comes something rare: certainty. Certainty about who stands with them without agenda. Certainty about who brings peace instead of pressure. Certainty about who does not need to diminish others to feel significant. Those two friends sense this certainty, and it unsettles them deeply. They realize that the story they built about you has failed, not because it was challenged, but because it was outgrown. Their opinions no longer land. Their words no longer shape outcomes. They attempt one final adjustment, softening their tone, reframing their intentions, pretending neutrality. But it is too late, because once someone recognizes manipulation, even subtle manipulation becomes obvious. The person you love no longer engages emotionally with their commentary. They listen politely, but they do not absorb. This emotional distance is the clearest sign of all. Influence has ended, and when influence ends, the truth finally has room to breathe without interference. Here is the revelation that changes how everything will move forward. The person you love now understands that you were never the risk in their life. You were the constant. There comes a point in every meaningful connection where silence begins to speak louder than words. Not because emotions disappear, but because trust finally settles in naturally. You became that rare kind of presence. Calm without being distant. Supportive without trying to dominate. Steady without demanding recognition for it. In a world where people constantly compete to be heard, your quiet consistency carried a different kind of weight. They noticed that. Slowly at first, then all at once. The way you listened instead of reacting. The way you gave space instead of pressure. The way you stayed composed while confusion and outside opinions tried to cloud everything. Those moments may have looked small from the outside, yet they built something undeniable over time. Now they understand the difference between temporary attention and genuine emotional safety. That realization changes everything. They no longer feel attracted to chaos disguised as passion. They begin searching for honesty, depth, and peace. The very things your energy naturally brought into their life. And when someone finally experiences that kind of connection, it becomes impossible to forget. At the same time, something shifts deeply within them on a personal level. They stop carrying guilt for past uncertainty. They forgive themselves for the delays, the second guessing, and the fear that once held them back. More importantly, they forgive themselves for overlooking the value of quiet loyalty while being distracted by louder influences. That inner forgiveness clears away emotional heaviness they no longer wish to carry. Now their choices feel simpler, clearer, and more certain. They no longer need approval from outsiders or explanations to defend what feels real to them. Certainty removes the urge to constantly justify, and once doubt loses its grip, connection transforms into something far more lasting, something grounded, peaceful, and genuinely strong, and alignment changes behavior permanently. This phase ends with a simple but irreversible truth. You are no longer being measured by opinion. You are being valued by experience. The person you love now knows exactly who you are, not through stories, but through presence. And those who once believed you were very unaware are left watching from the outside, trying to understand how they misread everything so badly. What they never understood is this: real strength does not announce itself early. It reveals itself when it matters most. And when it does, it cannot be ignored. This is not the end. This is the point of no return. After the point of no return, everything slows down in a strange but meaningful way. The person you love no longer rushes decisions or seeks validation from outside voices. Their mind feels clearer, lighter, as if a constant background noise has finally stopped. In this stillness, they begin to recognize how much energy was once spent managing perceptions instead of living truthfully. You become the place where that truth feels safest. Conversations between you grow deeper, not because you talk more, but because nothing important is being hidden anymore. There is no need to guess intentions, no need to read between lines. What exists is alignment, and alignment creates a quiet confidence that neither of you feels the need to explain to anyone else. The absence of those two friends becomes noticeable now, not dramatically, but unmistakably. Their presence fades from daily relevance. Messages arrive less often. Opinions carry less weight. The emotional pull they once had is gone. This absence does not create loss. It creates space. And in that space, the person you love discovers something unexpected. Peace. Not excitement, not intensity, peace. The kind of peace that allows reflection without anxiety. The kind of peace that confirms a choice without forcing reassurance. They realize that the discomfort they once felt was never caused by you. It was caused by misalignment between truth and influence. And now that influence is gone, the discomfort disappears with it. What strengthens this bond even further is what does not happen. There is no confrontation scene, no final argument, no dramatic ending. The people who lose relevance often do so quietly because their power depended on being needed. Once they are no longer needed, there is nothing left to fight over. The person you love understands this now. They do not feel anger toward those friends. They feel clarity. And clarity is far more powerful than anger. It allows them to move forward without dragging old narratives into new chapters. That is why the connection feels lighter yet more grounded. It no longer depends on proving worth or chasing validation, but rests in a quiet certainty that has already settled in. There is an ease in its presence, as though constant explanation is no longer required. A deeper respect begins to form in the way they speak about you, and even in your absence. Your name is no longer shaped by casual opinions or shifting interpretations. It carries a steadier weight that resists distortion from outside noise. It feels protected, not through control or possession, but through understanding and clarity, a protection rooted in principle rather than attachment. It emerges from witnessing who remains consistent when assumptions collapse and surface impressions fade. In that space, you are not treated as a subject of discussion, but as a reference point of calm stability. This standing is never demanded. It is slowly earned through behavior over time. The person who values you does not need to announce this shift because it is visible in their actions. It shows in the choices they make, the boundaries they maintain, and the steadiness they hold even during uncertainty. Over time, consistency becomes unmistakable, and once it is truly recognized, it cannot be easily replaced because it forms the foundation of trust, emotional safety, and a quiet sense of certainty that lingers even when words are absent.